Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In the summer of 1997, a seemingly ordinary weekend visit to Afton, Wyoming would become an experience that would forever change the lives of Vincent and Jane Font. The couple had accepted an invitation from Jane's grandparents to spend a few days at their property, a 3-acre plot of land purchased in the spring of 1982. While the grandparents had built their own home near the main road on the northwest edge of the property, it was the old farmhouse that stood roughly 50 yards to the south that would become the focal point of an unsettling series of events. The 60-year-old farmhouse had stood on the property long before Jane's grandparents acquired the land. Though they had initially considered renovating it into a guest cottage, they ultimately decided against it, relegating the structure to storage space. By 1997, it had become a dilapidated old building on the property, its weathered frame holding secrets that would soon make themselves known to the unsuspecting couple. Vincent Font had always maintained a casual interest in the paranormal through horror movies and documentaries. His wife Jane, however, was far more involved, conducting her own ghost hunting expeditions and collecting EVP recordings and spirit photographs. Though Vincent was sceptical of most supernatural evidence, some of Jane's audio recordings had given him pause, capturing sounds he couldn't easily explain. Yet he had never experienced anything paranormal firsthand until that July weekend in 1997. The couple arrived at the property late on a Friday evening. After sharing coffee and conversation with Jane's grandparents, they retired to their room for the night. As they lay awake talking, their attention turned to the old farmhouse, visible through their window under the full moon. Vincent remarked on its foreboding presence and asked Jane about its interior. To his surprise, she admitted she had never been inside, explaining that her grandfather had forbidden it due to concerns about the roof's stability. The following morning at breakfast, Jane broached the subject with her grandfather. His response was swift and decisive. "It's a dangerous place, there's bats in the attic, and I don't want you poking around in there." He attempted to change the subject by suggesting a morning horseback ride, and while Jane appeared to let the matter drop, Vincent knew his wife too well to believe she would be so easily deterred. Sure enough, as they walked towards the horse stable an hour later, Jane revealed her plan to investigate the farmhouse once her grandfather left for groceries. Vincent's reluctance was evident, but knowing his wife's determination, he agreed to accompany her rather than risk her exploring the potentially dangerous structure alone. Under the scorching midday sun, they approached the old farmhouse. While Vincent hesitated at the entrance, casting nervous glances over his shoulder, Jane strode purposefully inside. The doorless entryway opened into a large room cluttered with cardboard boxes and a work table laden with horse tack. To their right, a smaller room, likely a former bedroom, was rendered inaccessible by stacks of boxes and crates. To their left, a narrow doorway revealed a rickety staircase leading to the attic. Light filtered through a large cracked window, its glass peculiarly painted over and now peeling. The walls revealed an interesting historical detail. Draft holes had been plugged with old newspapers, some dating back to the early 1930s. As Jane examined the yellowed pages, the first inexplicable event occurred, a distinct thump from overhead. The sound caused Vincent to start violently, his instincts urging him toward the exit. But before he could voice his concern, Jane silenced him with a sharp gesture. They stood frozen, eyes fixed on the blackened wood above. When Vincent suggested it might be the bats his grandfather-in-law had mentioned, a second thump resonated through the structure, this time from the far corner of the attic. Unlike the random movements of flying creatures, this sound carried the weight of deliberate movement. A third impact followed, strong enough to dislodge dirt from the rafters, accompanied by what Vincent could only describe as a dragging shuffle across the overhead floorboards. As he grabbed Jane's arm and attempted to lead her out, she remained transfixed, her head tilted toward the attic stairs as she whispered, "It sounds like there's someone up there." What happened next would challenge Vincent's rational worldview forever. Through the wooden barrier between floors came a soft, muffled voice calling out, "David, is that you?" Their exit was instantaneous and synchronized, as if choreographed by pure instinct. They found themselves back in the sunlight, moving quickly through the tall grass toward the main house. However, Jane's grandfather's name was not David, and neither Vincent nor Jane knew anyone by that name, strange as it may seem, the name being such a common one. Rather than experiencing the unexpected rush of exhilaration or adrenaline once safely away in the sunlight and familiar concrete world, they found themselves oddly subdued. The experience went unmentioned until late that night as they lay sleepless in bed. Only then did they begin to process what they had encountered. Vincent, desperately seeking rational explanations, proposed various possibilities, no matter how far-fetched, from radio signals somehow being amplified to an old phonograph player falling over, scratching out sounds they mistook for a voice. Jane's alternative theory proved more disturbing: the possibility of someone secretly living in the attic. This suggestion prompted Vincent to stand watch at the window, contemplating whether to investigate with a baseball bat or contact the police. Ultimately, they decided to conduct their own investigation at daybreak, choosing not to worry Jane's grandparents with their concerns. The next morning, Vincent armed himself with a short-handled shovel found on the property, while Jane brought her ever-present mini cassette recorder and a long-handled flashlight. Their second entry into the farmhouse quickly dispelled the notion of human squatters. The structure's deteriorated condition made it clear that anyone attempting to climb the rotted attic stairs would risk serious injury. After several minutes of listening to nothing but the occasional settling of old wood, they decided to attempt accessing the attic. Vincent had noticed a sturdy plank in the yard, 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 3 inches thick. They devised a plan to lay it across the stairs as a makeshift ramp, reinforcing it from below with scattered 2x4s found outside. Working in the early dawn light, they constructed their improvised access point, conscious of the need to avoid detection by Jane's grandparents. After a brief argument over who should go first, Vincent took the lead, crawling up the plank on hands and knees with the shovel ready. The morning sun streaming through holes in the roof provided adequate illumination of the attic space. However, Vincent's previous fear had transformed into something more primal, a territorial instinct that surprised him given his unfamiliarity with the place. The attic revealed only the remnants of previous occupants: a rusted bed spring, a deteriorating mattress propped against the wall, scattered empty crates, and in the furthest corner, a solitary rocking chair facing the wall. Jane's sudden appearance behind Vincent drew his attention back to their task. Her flashlight beam methodically scanned the space, definitively disproving Vincent's phonograph theory. The inch-thick layer of undisturbed dust covering the floorboards similarly eliminated their squatter hypothesis. No one had traversed this space in years. Before departing, Jane placed her cassette recorder in record mode near the attic entrance, despite Vincent's protests. That evening, they maintained their silence about their investigation during dinner with Jane's grandparents. avoiding any questions about the property's history or previous occupants. Jane explained that her grandfather's practical mindset wouldn't have been receptive to discussions of supernatural possibilities. The following morning, they rose before dawn for one final visit to retrieve the recorder and dismantle their makeshift ramp. Everything appeared unchanged, no signs of disturbance, no new footprints in the dust beyond their own. Vincent had just retrieved the recorder and they were finishing clean-up when the familiar thump resounded once again. Jane's attention had already fixed upward before the sound, as if anticipating it. A second, more violent impact showered them with dust from the rafters, followed by the sickening shuffling sound, now clearly suggestive of something dragging itself across the floor toward the attic entrance. They fled immediately, but not before hearing the voice again, closer and clearer than before, its raspy tone calling out, "David, I saw you." After putting half the distance between themselves and the farmhouse, Vincent slowed his pace, repeatedly glancing backward while trying to reassure himself. Jane had stopped to examine the recorder, discovering it had been switched off midway through the tape. Not from depleted batteries, as the rewind function worked perfectly. Their examination was interrupted by Jane's grandmother emerging onto the back porch, requiring a quick explanation about saying goodbye to the horses. Only after departing the property did they finally have the opportunity to review the recording. Vincent pulled over about a mile from the house, ensuring they could hear any subtle sounds. The tape began with Jane's voice and their exit, followed by extended silence broken only by settling wood and distant traffic. Then something remarkable emerged, the sound of short, shallow breathing that grew progressively louder, as if something was approaching the microphone. After the breathing faded and a brief silence, they heard singing. The voice was unmistakably that of an elderly woman, perhaps in her 80s or older, performing an unrecognisable melody that resembled a lullaby. Despite numerous subsequent attempts to enhance and analyse the recording, including sharing it with others interested in paranormal phenomena, the song's specific words remained indecipherable. However, it was the recording's final moments that would permanently alter Vincent's perception of reality. The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by a dry, hoarse giggle that erupted into maniacal laughter. Then, most disturbingly, the sound of something making contact with the microphone preceded the abrupt stop of the recording, as if an invisible finger had deliberately pressed the button. Decades later, after the old farmhouse was demolished and Jane's grandparents had sold the property, this experience remains etched in Vincent's memory. While the mysterious voice and inexplicable sounds were unsettling, it was those final seconds of recorded laughter and the deliberate stopping of the tape that continued to unnerve and perplex him, suggesting that some experiences defy rational explanation.